I saw that debate between you and Amender, first Amender, and I was seething a little bit because I wanted you to say certain things, but obviously you don't use the same arguments that I do. So I wanted to help you out a little bit. All right.
Yeah, that's good.
Um, that's good. You were down for
Yeah,
that?
that's cool. Yeah, yeah. So did you
All
take like
right.
notes or something?
So, um, okay. So I was thinking maybe we could watch it together, and then I could tell you like, and then we can pause it. We could just like review it together, and then I'll tell you what I could like pause it at certain spots, and I'll tell you where I think you could do better at. Because I feel like it's
Okay.
better to show than to just tell. Does that make sense?
It does. Let's
Okay.
see.
So do you want to put? Are you on a computer right now?
Yes, I am.
All right. Could you pull it up on the Discord for me? Since I'm at work right now, but I could
Yeah,
talk.
I can
Don't
do
worry.
that.
So fundamentally, what we're talking about when it comes to law is the function of law is to settle disputes over scarce means, right? So the first question that you have to get them to acknowledge in order for you to well in order for you to I guess make a good argument, you have to ask them this question, which is the question that I always ask them, which is, do you own your body? Now they can say yes or no, right? They could say yes, I am the owner of my body. Yeah. So if they say that they are the owner of their body, what you do is you follow up with that and you say, the reason why I ask you this question is because if you are the owner of your body, you are saying that you ought have the right to exclude others from the use of your body when you have not initiated an aggression. Now, if they agree to that, then you're pretty much good. Now, if they disagree with that, they say, no, I am not the owner of my body. The first thing you ask them, okay, well, is your body a scarce resource? You're still with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen a lot of your
Okay.
debates, and I see you always start with the do you own your body?
Yep. And now I'm explaining to you kind of like why I always do that. So if they say the next question is, okay, well, is your body a scarce resource? Now the obvious answer is yes. Um, and now let's say that we have somebody who's extremely stubborn and says, no, you're not. Your body is not a scarce resource. Well, then the next question is, well, can there be conflicts over its use? Because scarcity is defined by whether or not there could be conflicts over the use of a scarce resource. And conflicts is like there two people can't use that same thing at the same time. So if there's a dispute, it must go to one of them because by using it, you must necessarily exclude it, the use from the other individual. So when there's a dispute, you must go one way or another, right? So that's why property rights must necessarily be individual. So because of that, um, shit, I almost lost my train of thought. So because of that, they have no choice. After that, they have no choice but to say. So if they're you have to ask them: is can there be conflicts over your body? If they say yes, then they do believe that your body is scarce. But nobody really actually believes that. Generally, most people don't believe that your body isn't a scarce resource. So we could skip ahead on that. So it's the second that you get them to admit that their body is a scarce resource, you've already won the argument. And the reason why I say that is because if you say that your body is a scarce resource, any way that they want to settle the dispute over that scarce resource can now be applied to your body. So, for instance, when I was debating, what's his name? I asked him, okay, so what is your preferred way of settling disputes over scarce resources? Let's say two people have a dispute over a scarce resource. What's your preferred way of settling that dispute? His preferred way was voting. Okay, perfect. Well, if there's two people who have a dispute over a scarce resource, you believe that they ought to vote in order to settle that dispute. So the next question is, okay, so you have to apply that to a person's body in order to get them to really understand the ramifications of their the way that they want to settle disputes. So my question then was, okay, let's say there's 10 people on an island and there's a dispute over your body. 10 of the guys want to rape you, and the 10 other, and you don't want to be raped. Because they put it to a vote and they're all benefiting from it, wouldn't it make it okay for them to rape you? The next question, the obvious answer is going to be no. Everybody, of course, because most people don't believe that rape is right, right? So they're going to have to say no to that. They're going to have to be like, oh, no, 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 it's not okay to rape you. Well, what we're talking about is settling disputes over scarce means. So if you're saying if there's a dispute over scarce resources and the way to settle that dispute is to do voting, well, then if somebody votes to rape somebody, well, then they must be allowed to rape that person under your standard. And you could apply that to pretty much anything. So, like, for instance, First Amender in this video, he kind of says, oh, I think that welfare is, or food stamps is better because he makes a utilitarian argument, which is essentially, oh, I think because there's a net benefit for individuals as a whole, I think that we should, when there's a dispute over that money, that tax money, it should go to the poor person, right? So then what you got to do is you got to be like, okay, so if there's just a dispute, and the way that you settle that dispute is by choosing the choice that you believe has the most utility, then you give them the dog rape example, utopian dog rape example. Do you remember that one?
Yes, you basically said that if you could have a beautiful utopia and like only once a year like some people went downstairs and like fucked up a dog, then
Well, rape the dog, yeah.
Yeah, would you be cool with that?
Yeah, and if they didn't do that, then the utopia would collapse. And the reason why I bring that up is because that's a situation in which you can justify pretty much anything, because if you're a utilitarian, because it is clear that there's more utility in allowing the utopia to exist than it is to, say, rape a dog. You know what I'm saying? Or rape a child, or rape a this, or rape a that, or insert anything, insert any nasty, disgusting action, right? They'd have no choice but to say, hey, well, the utility clearly is one way or another. Now, if they say no, well, obviously, you're not obligated to rape that dog, right? Then they'd have you say, you got to be like, okay, well, then you have no choice but to drop your claim. Because if there was a dispute over scarce resources, such as like in welfare, there's two people that want to use that. The taxpayer wants to use his money for his own goods, his own resources, and the politician wants to take it from the person, one person, to give it to the poor person. There's a dispute. So who should it ought to go to? So he says, oh, well, it ought to go to who has the best utility. Well, then there's a dispute there. You're saying utility ought to be the way in which we settle this dispute. So if that's the case, then in this case, you must also say that someone must rape that dog. Do you understand?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. Okay, so I'm sorry. I may have been rambling a lot. But yeah, play the video.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Unless you wanted to say something.
What's fine? No, I agree with everything you're saying.
Yeah.
It is the Zulu way to, you know, get the like perfect legal system, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
I may just not be good at memorizing all those steps, since I come at conversations more like, I have to say I don't think I'm a good debater. I think I'm a good discusser. Like, I'm good at talking with people. But I think that's just because like my entire life I've been discussing with people to get to truth, not really debating. So when I do enter debates like First Amenders and the thing I did with Evolutionary Capitalist, I more talk to them to understand their points of view rather than like debate bro them, just because I'm not used to debating, and I think my body automatically takes over and just sort of directs me to have a conversation with them and match their energy in the gayest way possible. So
No, listen, you don't need to. I'm not telling you to like jump down their throat or anything. But if I was in that situation, that would be the counter argument I would make to best illustrate why settling disputes in that manner, even that person doesn't necessarily agree with that. Because if they did, they'd have no choice but to say yes to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's a good point. It's a
Yeah.
good point to challenge their utilitarianism and see how far they're
Yeah.
willing to go through with it.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's play the video. Go ahead.
All right, cool. Let me know if anything doesn't work.
I don't know why off the top of my head I just thought topless women.
All right,
Women have to
topless
wear
women.
tops. It's completely arbitrary. It unironically is completely arbitrary, but like I don't really see any harm in it. I mean, I'm kind of on the realm of free the boob, but you know that's a different discussion, I guess.
Super duper based, bro. That's a good take. But
But it's
All right.
arbitrary,
Pause.
right?
Pause for
Like
one
it's
sec.
like the
Okay, so
what's
the
up?
the anarcho-capitalist position on this, I know this is kind of stupid, but I'm nitpicking a little bit. So the anarcho-capitalist position on this is, if so long as you're on the property of individuals who consent to you allowing you to walk around without your top off, then you aren't violating anyone's rights by doing so. So therefore, you should be allowed, so long as you aren't violating another property right owner's consent, to wear no top. That's what I would say. Now, yeah,
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. All
So
right.
interesting.
Yeah.
The reason I'm coming at it from this angle is because I've created like this system, or I went through it basically. And what I found is that the NAP is the only legal system that is non-arbitrary, meaning it's completely consistent all the way around. If you look at any
Yep.
other legal system, such as like socialism, communism, mixed economies, whatever the frick, they all implement an arbitrary law where they essentially one law contradicts another. And like it's this idea
Absolutely.
of should we protect the rights of people? And it's like yes.
Yeah.
And then if you go deeper into the system, they always have rules that violate those protections of people. And in our case, mostly it's taxes. When you tax people, you're violating their consent, and this goes against the whole idea of protecting someone's rights. So right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pin him down on agreeing with me that arbitrary laws can't exist. Now it's hard for him because
Yeah.
utilitarians are all arbitrary, like that's all they know. But I'm trying to get him to agree with me about a non-arbitrary legal system. And that's sort of why we're going down this rabbit hole.
The way that I normally do it is by showing them, and why I normally use those hypotheticals is by showing them the extent to where they're actually willing to take their own beliefs and showing them that they don't actually believe or consistently what they actually believe. So I think it's perfect because early and later in the video you say, "Oh, we have to have an objective law," and there's one thing I want to say about that is generally we want to stray away, and only for optic reasons, right? Stray away from saying this law is objectively true unless they push you on it. What I would just say is that it's consistent, because the second that you say it's like what you call it, objective, well then they're going to move the focus from the consistency to objectivity. So yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
continue. Mm-hmm.
the reason
video,
why it's just like a cultural thing that doesn't really have a basis. But I don't think there's anything wrong by like having restrictions on like I don't know if I guess if that restriction does exist, then men ought to have that restriction as well. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Well, this is the way I see it. All right. I see it as if you set a standard that you want to implement, for example, you can't hurt innocent people. A law that says yes, you can't hurt innocent people would be objective, or a law that says no, you can't hurt innocent people would be objective. But anything in between those two things would be arbitrary. Would you agree with that?
No.
Okay, wouldn't that just be the definition of arbitrary? Because if it's a yes or no question, you give another answer other than yes or no. If it's not a non-binary question, wouldn't you say that it's arbitrary?
No.
Okay, can you give me an example where it wouldn't be arbitrary?
Like a law?
Yeah, so like if we're
So you
using a
got him
law
there.
that
That's
has a
good.
yes or no like implementation, so
A
like you can.
non-arbitrary
The
law
law
would
of
be
excluded middle.
that
There is no law.
don't.
I mean, the law of excluded middle.
Yeah, I'm trying to have him agree to the law of the excluded middle, but I mean, I could have said I think I want to start all my discussions this way, but I think I just want to ask people, do you agree with the laws of logic? And if they don't, then we just can't have a conversation. But so I kind of want to ask
Yeah,
them
yeah,
that
yeah.
question starting forward. I want to ask
Perfect.
them
Yeah,
if they agree with logic because without logic, we can't really have a discussion.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Don't kill unreasonably. It would be a non-arbitrary law.
Yeah, so like for example,
That's by
let's just use
definition is
don't murder because
arbitrary.
don't murder is easier. Okay, so Yeah. let's say that we have two options here. We can say you can't murder or you can murder.
Well,
And
the
so
reason
you
why
would say,
didn't say murder was because in murder it literally just says the unjustified killing, so it's literally baked into the definition. I'm simply saying killing without reason.
okay, sure, we can do that, killing without reason. So you could say yes, we can kill without reason, or no, we can't kill without reason. And I would say that if you tried to put in a third answer there, that would be arbitrary because it's not one of those binary yes or no's. And when I say it's arbitrary, I
Well,
mean
the
it's
world isn't binary
unjustified.
yes or no. There's usually nuance to almost every discussion.
Well, there's no nuance to yes or no.
That's correct. I'm saying that you shouldn't apply black or whites to moral quandaries because it ends up being.
I just want to say real quick
Mhm.
that yes, the world does come down to yes and no's. It's just many
Yeah,
of the things that we call gray areas are yes and no's we haven't discovered yet.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's basically we don't ones that we don't really have a full answer to, or we haven't really. Yeah, like you said, we haven't discovered yet.
exactly.
Um, no, that's a perfect thing. What I would say to him is, okay, so if it's not arbitrary, who gets to decide, or how do you determine whether or not something is, what did he say, justified or unjustified? Like, how do you determine that? That would be my question.
Yes.
Because
Oh,
his question, yeah, because
and for
I would be like, okay,
justification, yeah, how would you do justification? Because I would think that all of his justifications are sort of maybe arbitrarily made depending on his utilitarian calculus.
and then yeah, so he would have no choice but to say like, oh well, a group of people decide, or da 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 da. So then my question is like, okay, so how do they decide? Like, how do they know whether or not something is unjustified or justified?
Okay, okay. So
In
infinite
the end of the
regress. You
day,
keep asking why. You keep asking why.
hmm
Okay.
yeah. So eventually you're going to get them to a point where somebody, the person who is making a decision, you have to ask them, okay, so how does that person make that decision? Like, how does he come to the conclusion that this person is justified or unjustified? Then he will give you a standard. So you kind of have to push him on that to get that standard. Okay, so then how do you determine whether or not something is unjustified or unjustified? Because you can't always just be, oh, well, it's up to a judge, it's up to a judge, it's up to a judge. Well, you can in certain situations, right? But that you got to one like if that judge were to say something like, for instance, we go by the non-aggression principle, right? So it doesn't matter what the judge says, whether the non-aggression principle, we're going to follow the non-aggression principle, whether the judge believes it or doesn't believe it. So, it doesn't necessarily matter what the judge says. So, what I'm trying to say is that so let's say if somebody were to say, oh, well, it's up to the judge. Okay, well, then you could say, okay, let's say the judge were to say something that violates the non-aggression principle or does something in which they disagree with, such as like, okay, well, let's say the judge says, in order to square this out, he must rape the other person. Would that then make it okay? Well, no, obviously not, because, judges can't do that. Okay, so then how do you determine whether or not the judge is making a justified decision? It has to be based on your arbitrary notion of what you consider to be justified or unjustified. Does that make any sense?
It does. And let me ask you this because I can't think of it right now. But if we push him back all the way, he will never get to a justification. But if we push ourselves all the way back, what is our standard?
The non-aggression principle. The non-aggression principle is our standard for every dispute whenever there's a dispute over scarce resources, the non-aggression principle, the person who got that property without violating the consent of another individual, they are justified in use. They have the best claim to that scarce resource. So, so for instance, when it comes to the man on the island, when 10 people on an island and there's one guy, 10 people want to rape one guy or something like that. If he said it was up to a judge, well, then he would say in that dispute, he would have to say, okay, well, a judge decides. Well, then I would ask, oh, well, let's say the judge says it's okay to rape them. Would that make it okay? They would say no. But we would say, well, the person owns their body. So no matter what their justification is, whether they vote for it, whether a judge says it, whether this, whether that, no matter what, no person has the right to use that other person's property, their body, without the consent, because that would then violate the non-aggression principle. So every time there's a dispute between two individuals over any scarce resource, whether it is their body, whether it is a house, whether it is a toy car, or anything, it could be literally anything, we always go to the non-aggression principle to solve that dispute. Who is not again, a person trying to rape another person. The person who is being raped would be the property owner of her own body, so therefore that rapist would be violating the property of the individual who doesn't want to be raped. So that would be our standard, no matter what. That's why, like, when I debate, like, a utilitarian, I always tell them, I was like, listen, there's no situation in which you can give me where I would say that rape is okay. But there is a situation in which I could give a utilitarian where you would say, not only is rape okay, but somebody is morally obligated to rape somebody. And then you would give the utilitarian dog rape example or child rape example. Because in that situation, they would have no choice but to say, yes, somebody is not only is it right to rape that person, but they would be morally obligated to do so. And by not doing so, they would be doing a wrong. Because by not doing so, they would be not increasing the utility of mankind. Does that make sense?
It does. Well,
yeah.
Okay. Let me give you the answer of what my justification would be for the NAP. My justification would be this.
Yeah.
I'm an egoist first and foremost. I've proven it logically, and so I always do what is in my self-interest. What is in my self-interest is that I want to live free, and I want the people around me to live free. And the best way to get that standard is by applying the non-aggression principle. And when we make the non-aggression principle a legal standard, if we don't have the non-aggression principle as a legal standard, then this means that it is okay to harm innocent people. And if we take that to its logical, absurd conclusion, then we would have an entire world of people raping and killing and murdering and stealing.
Yes.
And that's the argument I would make. If we don't have the NAP, what's it called? The reductio ad absurdum is that anybody is justified to do whatever they want.
Yes. But again,
so it's
that
a
would turn it back to
argument.
might makes right. Yeah, it would basically be might makes right. And again, the issue with might makes right is you're not distinguishing between ownership and possession. When you use your body, you're saying I ought to have the right to use my body. But then also saying if somebody else has the strength to take my body without my consent, they then have the right to use my body. But nobody actually believes that. If that was true, then nobody would ever talk or use their body ever, because they aren't the owners of their body. Any other person that is stronger than them is then the owner. So by using their body, they're admitting that, hey, I ought to have the right to use my body and exclude others from the use of my body. So therefore, I am the owner. And if they still hold on to the belief that might still makes right, well, then punch them in the face, not literally, and see how they react to it. If they get upset with the fact that you punch them in the face, well, then they are claiming that you do not have a right to use their property, despite the fact that you have the might. But then that would go against their whole ethic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Their whole ethic, because they were saying earlier that might makes right. Well, I had the might right to punch you, and you didn't want me to punch you, so therefore you don't even believe your own ethic.
True. Every single debate should just be held in a cage.
Yeah, it's really true in the fact that nobody believes that. Yeah. and why we say it's objectively true is because it's not that it's objectively. It's in the sense that it's like 1 + 1 = 2, and we could deduce it from logic because the I'm sorry, I'm saying this completely incorrectly.
It's
The
cool.
reason why the non-aggression principle is true, right, is because the everyone who acts agrees with it. Any individual who acts agrees with it. So therefore, it's a truth that we all agree with, and if a person can only act. That's the only thing that they can't do. Even by dying, you're acting. You're choosing to die. You know what I mean? So therefore, uh, yeah, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
I know we're talking a
Nice.
lot, but I'm talking a
It's
lot.
good. It's
Yeah,
good. I think the more we talk, I think the better we understand the concepts. So I'm glad we are.
absolutely. And I'm glad you have a good understanding so far, which is good. So
Yes.
let's continue the video.
All right.
More relative than you think. It's not yes or no. That's my point.
I agree with you morally, but legally, you would say we have to be consistent.
Sure. Sure. I'll agree with that.
Okay, exactly.
Consistency is good.
So when we say, as you used your definition before, you can't. What did you say? You can't kill unjustified or something.
You cannot kill for no reason.
You cannot kill for no reason. So you would
Yeah.
say that we would have to have a consistent standard there for everybody, right?
Sure.
And the reason for that would be that
He doesn't
if
like
it
what
Well,
I'm
wasn't
it's that we
doing.
consistent,
ought have a consistent standard. Is the Yeah.
He likes to
And-
avoid questions.
he sees I'm leading him down a path. That's why he's saying sure.
Yeah,
It's so funny, dude.
yeah.
Well, right. And the reason we have to say ought is because if it wasn't that way, then we could
It would not
implement
predicate
laws
survival.
subjectively.
Well, no, it would have a negative effect on survival. People would survive less as a result of all the killing.
True. Okay. So I think my issue would be that laws just can't be arbitrary, and if they are arbitrary, they have no justification to be arbitrary. And so I would say something like
No, there's laws that are arbitrary but perfectly justifiable.
such
You understand if
as-
something is arbitrary? I already gave you one. The topless women. Women have to wear tops.
Wait, why is it-
completely arbitrary?
Okay, so what I would have said
it
here, right,
justified? Why is
is
it justified?
how about this? Hold, pause it for a sec.
Yeah.
So this is a little debate tactic that he does, that he understands what you're saying, but he's being semantic with you, right? So what you should have said, as opposed to saying, "Oh, you can't justify a arbitrary law," he's going to say, "Well, I could justify it." What you should have said is, "You can't justify it without contradiction." That's what you should have said. Because he's just going to turn around and be like, "Oh, well, I can do whatever I want. I can." So, for instance, like there's some people that like, I'll be like, "Oh, you can't murder people." He's like, "I can murder anyone I want." Well, it's just like, well, you can't murder somebody without contradicting yourself. That's what you should have said. You know what I'm saying? And people do that to me all the time, and that's what I kind of notice when debating certain people. If that makes sense. Do you understand what I mean when I say that?
Yeah, that's true. I think my only problem would be if I said that, I wouldn't know how to back that up.
Yeah. So what you would say is that having an arbitrary law, right, is just basically in the any single time that there's a dispute over scarce resource, we just have one individual choosing based on his own whims and wishes. But the issue with that is he doesn't actually believe that. And the reason why is because, okay, the next question would be, well, then who do you believe ought to have the right to arbitrarily choose, or based on their whims and wishes, whether or not something is justified or not justified? He would have to say either himself, a judge, or this person, or that person. If he says somebody other than himself, right, then your next question would be, okay, well, let's say this person whom you are putting in charge of determining whether or not this is justified or not justified, come to a determination in which you completely disagree with. Would you then just let it go? or would you still consider it to be an injustice? So, for instance, let's say the judge in which you appointed decided to say that the murder that was clearly on video, in which everyone can see was unjustified, was justified. Would you then just be like, okay, well, the judge said so, so therefore, uh, you know, there's justice there? Obviously, he would say no. His answer would be like, no, obviously that judge is incorrect. So then you're not going by other people's whims and wishes. You're going by your own whims and wishes. You're going by what you think is the best way to deal with that situation. But the issue with that, again,
You can't
is
justify your
that
whims.
you can't justify your own whims. Now, because the second that you try to justify your own whims and another person justifies their whims, you have two separate laws. When you have two separate laws and there's a dispute between two people who have two separate laws, how do you settle that dispute? It's impossible. That breeds conflict. That creates conflict. What we're trying to do is avoid conflict over scarce resources. And that's the whole point of property rights, to avoid conflicts over scarce resources. But if everybody has their own law, well, then nobody's wrong under any dispute because they could just choose their own law anytime there's a dispute. So then we're back to might makes right. So there must be an objective standard in which we all look to, in which we can settle these disputes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right, continue.
It's not, well, I don't know. Maybe like people are like, well, I kind of feel vulnerable and I don't want to, it's entirely their feeling, yet it's still justified. That's a justifiable feeling.
So sorry.
But it's arbitrary. It's based off of a person's personal whim rather than a reason or a system.
Agreed, but okay, here's my problem. Sorry, when I say justified, I mean objectively justified, not subjectively justified. So I think there's a problem with subjective justifications.
What is objectively
in law.
justified?
Well, that's my point. Objectively justified.
See, that's where
binary
I told you
when
earlier when
comes
you
to
say
the,
objectively, he's going to push you on objectively. So what you should have said was a consistent way, because he would have been like, oh, okay, then that's. But I think later in the video you said that, so you corrected yourself.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Like that's what happens first.
Mm-hmm.
The way I do it is like I have all these synonyms running through my brain, and then I'll just take the most convenient one, and the one that was most convenient there was objective, and then that's where the confusion came in, and then later on I think I clarified to consistent.
Yeah, because
I'll be more careful with that word.
About these people. One thing you need to know about these people is you're having a discussion with them, but they're debating you. So, do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean.
They're going to nitpick every word that you use. They're going to nitpick every word that you use to try to make you look stupid or try to make you look this way or that way. So you need to make sure that you're always trying your best. Obviously, you can't always do it in every situation, but trying your best to be as clear as possible what you say so they don't twist it up. Because that's what Lego did to me. Absolutely. All right, continue.
All right.
There is no objective justification. Like if you're talking about law, there is none. You're asking whether or not there's objective morality. There isn't. You're not going to find it.
No, I'm not a moral realist. I already told you this. I told you that when
then why would you make an argument
law,
saying that in law it could have a non-arbitrary justification, therefore like an objective interpretation to the law?
Because law has to be objective. It has to be consistent. Is that fair or no?
So I feel like we're getting lost into
semantics.
What do you think objective means?
I just mean consistent across the board.
That's what objective means to you?
Objective law, yeah.
So objective
right here,
means it is not influenced by personal feelings or
say.
Opinions in considering.
But he knows what you're trying to say, but right now he's trying to make you look stupid right now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's the one thing that I very much dislike about people like him, is that he's just trying to make you look stupid. Whoa! So, yeah, that's like but I catch it. I could catch that. He definitely knows what you're trying to say. That's all I'm trying to say.
And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with the word objective law. If objective has different meanings, I agree with him that like there's a philosophical definition of objectivism, but I also think that you can use different definitions of objectivism for what like different kinds of systems and such, like law and science and things like this. But yeah, he's definitely holding me up on philosophical objectivism. So he got me there.
Yeah, and like you said, there's nothing wrong with using objective, like saying objective law. But if he pushes it on you on it, you must be ready with an answer. If not, well then focus on what you know best and stick to that. If not, then you're gonna end up like, I don't know, not looking as good, even though you're right.
Yeah.
Because I believe you're right in all of this. You know what I mean? It's so yeah.
All right.
All right.
Or representing facts. That's what objective means.
Okay. Sounds good. Does
So
that
are
not-
there so like an example of like an objective interpretation to the law is that the law says X, right? Whatever it says. And then we go there and we can read that the law says X, right? It is exactly that, right? That would the reading of it would be objective. It's not up to a person's individual interpretation as to whether or not the letters are in that particular combination. It is that, independent of your ability to interpret it, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just trying to get you,
So
got you
maybe
on you
the
on that
reading
one.
in itself is
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
he was
so.
doing got you there. Yeah. Sorry, continue.
That's cool.
objective, right? Like you're saying the thing and it's written in that book, it would be objective. The problem is that the reason why it's in that book is subjective. But that, by the way, that doesn't mean that that you're not supposed to follow whatever the X law is. You understand?
Yeah, I agree with you. So, like, I agree with you that the base layer, morality, doesn't necessarily have to be objective. For law to be, at least, I could stop using the word objective and just say consistent. I would say that law has to be consistent for us to have a society that works and is not chaotic. Because if we don't have a law that is consistent, what we will have is unfair treatment for certain different kinds of people.
Okay.
Hell
That's
yeah.
all I mean. So when I say something like an arbitrary arbitrary Bro says okay.
Yeah, that's a
law,
very good
all I-
point. If I could just add one little thing, that's a
Yeah.
very good point that you made. And the reason why is because the second that you say, you know, we should treat everybody the same, we need to have a unifying ethic. And the reason why is because we all are human beings. And any justification that you use to treat any other person in a different way than other people, that same justification can be used for you, you know? So we have to have a law that's unified for everybody. Because again, if not, that breeds conflict. That creates situations where someone can arbitrarily be like, "Hey, this black person, this white person, this person ought not have the right to do this or that." So yeah, continue.
Agreed. And also, I had this conversation with Socrates a little while ago, but I basically told him this is the reason why Lady Justice has a blindfold on, because she's not supposed to discriminate. And the thing about the legal system nowadays is it's heavily discriminatory towards rich people, towards
Absolutely.
different races of people. It's just, she's very discriminatory nowadays, and she needs to have that blindfold on so that's completely fair.
When you have arbitrary law, when you have individuals choosing how they believe law ought to be, as opposed to interpreting the the non-aggression principle, well then you create an incentive for those individuals to create their own laws for their own benefit. And so if you have those people who are the ones creating laws for their own benefit, well then how can you challenge them? Because you've given them the power to do that. So yeah.
All right, I'm going to continue. What I mean is that a law that is justified arbitrarily or not justified. And when I say justified, it's not consistent, right?
Okay. So what's your point?
My point is that I think we should create. I think we need to have a law where we cannot harm innocent people no matter what. Would you disagree with that?
A law where it says we cannot harm innocent people no matter what. The problem is I'm just trying to think, is there any instance where like an innocent person ought be harmed? Well, yeah, that's kind of the problem. No, taxation. Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe people should be taxed. Yeah, so I disagree.
I want to say
completely.
something real quick.
You
Hold on.
fucking got.
That's funny because the one thing, right, is you're asking him, is it wrong to harm an innocent person, or should we have a law to protect innocent people? But he's saying that people who don't pay taxes are innocent. He's basically admitting there that people who don't pay taxes are innocent. But if you're allowed to harm them, wouldn't it be by definition them being not innocent? Like, aren't you claiming that they're not innocent by harming them, or by saying that they're not paying taxes? You know what I
Well,
mean?
isn't he
Does that make sense?
saying that? Isn't he just saying that he's okay with harming innocent people? That right there.
Pretty much. Pretty much. And like, you have to, if you're saying that, unless you think that taxing on avoiding taxes is a crime, or you're violating another person's rights, you're basically saying that yes, it is okay for people to be harmed, by innocent people to be harmed, basically, which is kind of fucked. But
Yeah,
that's good
and
that
this
you
is
got him
my
there.
big problem, dude. This is why I'm so black-pilled, because it's like, at the end of the day, it's just like, we shouldn't harm good people. We shouldn't harm innocent people. And then the other side's like,
Yeah.
yes, we should. And it's like, what do you say to that? Like, how do you respond to that? Like, how can you convince them otherwise?
Well, you have to put them in a situation in which they're the receiver of the violence, or you have to put them in a situation where they couldn't possibly not condone the violence. Oh yeah, I'm
Yeah.
getting Chinese today. Hold on, give me. Yep. Why? You're gonna get something? Do you want me to get something for you?
Maybe.
Write it down on a paper, and I got you.
Are you going to the place by?
I'm going to the China Garden. Yes. Yes, yes, the one by the Publix. Yes. Sorry, my coworker asked me if I was getting Chinese food for lunch.
That's cool.
Okay. So what you got to do, right, is a lot of people on the outset, they think that that's a good answer. So what you got to do is you got to put, like I said earlier, is you got to put him in a situation where there's no possible way in which he's going to say yes. So the first question is, okay. After that, the first question is, like, okay, so then who has the right? And give me, okay, or give me a situation in which somebody has the right to violate another person's consent. And he said, not, right? So, okay, so if somebody, so I actually gave this question to Warmish. So let's say you're saying that it's okay to violate a person's consent when they have not paid taxes. So let's say the government were to say, if you don't pay taxes, it's okay to rape you. Would that make it okay? The obvious answer is no. They're obviously going to say no. And the thing is, what we're talking about is aggressions. Whether or not other people have the right to invade the property borders of your body, whether it be your body or the property in which you own. 5 is over there. 5 is over there. So, so rape is an aggression. Locking somebody up, that's an aggression when they haven't committed an aggression, I guess. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Punching somebody, attacking somebody, arresting them, doing this. These are all aggressions. These are all on the same thing. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like a sin to Christians, Oh, these are all sins. You know what I mean? These are all aggressions, right? So
Right.
if you think it's okay for someone to commit an aggression against another person, simply because they violated the tax rules, well then yeah, you're giving the government or whomever you're giving that power to the leeway to rape somebody if they do that thing. But he's never going to say yes to that. He's going to come up with some other dumb argument. But if he says, oh no, they can't do that, well then you got to throw it in his face. Well, then you don't actually believe that. Because if you thought it was okay for the government to violate consent simply because they tax somebody, or they don't tax, or they don't pay the taxes, I should say, well then they would have the leeway to do that. But if they don't, well then you don't actually believe that.
So here's how he would respond to this. If I told him,
Yeah.
okay, well, would you be okay if the IRS raped people who didn't pay taxes? He would say, no, but rape isn't the same thing as stealing. That's what he would say. So I guess the problem is we would need for him to agree to what aggression, like the definition of aggression. Because it seems that he's okay with some violence and not other, like he's okay with some violence, but not other violence.
Well, the thing is, you can't differentiate between a rape and a murder and a killing. And I mean, you could differentiate it in the sense that they have different effects on the body, but essentially they're all invasions of property borders. In the end of the day, that's really what it is. So if your body and all of these things that are happening, such as like, okay, a person that is taxing somebody or doesn't want to pay taxes. There's a dispute there. One person wants to not pay taxes, and the other people, they want them to pay taxes. There's a dispute going on. Is the way to settle that dispute to initiate an aggression against that person? Is to invade the property borders of that person? Yes. If it is yes, well then you're basically saying that any aggression essentially is okay. Essentially. Because the second that you give leeway for another person to invade the property rights of another person, why does it matter the way in which you do it? It's all the same thing, if that makes sense. In the matter of rape, a murder, a stabbing, it's all invasions of property borders, which are aggressions. And that's what we mean by aggressions. We don't just mean harming a person, just simply hitting a person, punching a person, arguing or just yelling at or raping a person. We mean we put all of those into one thing, which is invading. All of those entail
It's
invading the property borders of it. Yeah, it's one umbrella term for invading the property borders of an individual. So if the second he says that it is okay to initiate an aggression, well then that's basically what he's saying. He's saying that, well, then you have the right to violate that consent. So then you would have to ask him, what does he consider to be an aggression? That would have to, if he says no to that, basically. What do you think his answer would be to that?
If he said, what do I think an aggression is?
Well, like if you were to ask him, what do you think an aggression is? How do you think he would answer to that?
I think he would answer something like, I don't care what an aggression is. Something like that.
Well, he must care, because if somebody punches him in the face, obviously he's going to define that as aggression, right? So he does care to a certain extent. So the thing is, he's going to have to define what he considers to be an aggression. Because by automatically saying that yes, they do have the right to initiate an aggression, he opens the door for anyone to do pretty much whatever they want, or that authority figure to do whatever they want to that person if they violate this one thing. So we must keep it to we got to keep harping on like the aggression thing and not just simply like a wrongdoing. If that makes sense.
Right. So I
And we
understand
have
what you're
to
saying.
define
I
what we
think you're
mean by that.
saying
Yeah.
what we need to do is push it to its logical conclusion. So, for example, one example of this might be that instead of, and this is just a suggestion, maybe anarchists stop saying taxation is theft and we say taxation is violence, right? Because what we're doing is we're pushing it to its logical conclusion, which is we know the scenario that runs through it, which is what happens if you don't pay taxes. There's going to be violence used against you. And so, there could be even certain instances where we could say taxation is murder or something like that, where it's like
we should say taxation is an aggression. Taxation is an aggression.
We can say taxation is aggression. I would agree with you. I just think that most people wouldn't care what an aggression is because they're like, oh, that's some dumb libertarian term. That's probably what they would think. But we have to. I think we might need to use their terms, and their terms are like the things you figured out, which is the greatest term that is the most effective against them, which is rape examples. That's one of their terms that they know very well. So
So what I
And
would say is taxation is the unconsensual taking of another person's private property. That's how I generally, well, I consider theft to be the unconsensual taking of another person's private property, and that's how I would define it. So whenever somebody debates me on whether or not taxation is theft, I ask them, I was like, what do you think theft is? And generally, it always boils down to the unconsensual taking of another person's property. That's really what it boils down to. Because uh, because when I was debating Warmish the other day, she was just like, "Oh, well, if you don't pay your taxes, well, then you get thrown in jail." Well, is that consensual? Yeah, that is consensual. It's just like there's
yeah.
there's no possible way in which prison is consensual. You know what I mean? And she looked really, really stupid when she said that. So it's either they sound really, really stupid in trying to uh, push for that, or you get them to admit that it isn't, in fact, unconsensual. So either way, you win.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
There's the one thing that both First Amender and evolutionary capitalists got on me, which I don't think I
Mhm.
had a perfect response for, was that you are
Yes.
voluntarily choosing to live in the US, and so if you don't like it, you can move.
Okay. So here's the argument against that. All right. And I had a hard time arguing this as well. So my question to them would be, right? Let's say you're in your own house and a robber comes into your house and tries to say, "Hey, this is my house. This is no longer your house." Would you have the right to kick that person out? Should society's reaction to that be, "Why don't you just leave?"
Okay,
No,
yeah. So
obviously not. Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
So
I'm
let me
gonna
put this
I'm
in
gonna
my words
explain.
then.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so the way I would say this then is, if they tell me if you don't like it, leave, I would respond in the following. Okay, let's say a robber walks into my house and tells me that this is my house now. Does that mean I need
Yeah.
to leave? So I would
Yeah.
ask them a question. Does that mean I need to leave?
Yeah. And if their answer is no, well, then you're basically saying that that robber is not the just owner of the land in which you're kicking me out of. And then, so therefore, he does not have a right to say that to me because I am the owner of the land that I'm living on. The issue is the state is not the just owner of the land in which it claims to own. And then if they say, well, yes, they are, the government is the just owner of the land. Your next question is, okay, well then did the government get its land through voluntary transaction or homesteading? The answer is obviously no. Um, so
Yes.
because they didn't get their land through those just means, then they are not the owner of the land. So that is why taxation is theft, because taxation is the government coming in, claiming a land, and saying you must now pay us to uphold our system. But the issue isn't simply that they're taking from us. It well, it is all that is an issue, but the issue is that that another issue is that they're also claiming land that doesn't belong to them. They're claiming your land by saying that you need to pay me to stay here. That is initiating an aggression. So again, it's the same thing with a robber, right? If a robber comes into your house and says, "Hey, you need to pay me to stay here," they're claiming ownership over your house and are violating your rights. So if you have a right to kick that person out, it's the same thing with the government. The government isn't the just owner of the land in which it claims to own. So therefore, it has zero right to tell me, "Oh, well, if you don't like it, just leave." Same thing with the robber. The robber could come in and be like, "Give me your house." "No, I'm not giving you your house." "Well, if you don't like it, just leave." Well, it's just like you're not the owner of the house. The government isn't the owner of the land.
Okay. Okay, I'll try to remember that one. That's a really good, simple way of explaining it. If a robber walks into your home and tells you that this is their home now, is the response, do I leave? And then obviously they can't agree to that, because if that would look absolutely insane if they agreed to that.
So if they do agree with that, they're insane. They look insane. So you win on that one. And if
Yeah.
they don't say yes, if they do say, yeah, you do have the right to kick them out, well, then they're admitting that that simply because somebody claims a land, that doesn't give them the right to force you off of it. Uh, It's the same thing with the state. Unless you can prove that that state got its land through voluntary transaction or homesteading, well, then it's claiming a land that does not belong to them. So therefore, it doesn't have the right to kick you out. Simply because they say, oh, the land government owns this land. If you don't like it, just leave. Well, you could say the same thing with the robber.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Robert owns land. Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
Funny,
it's
bro.
also the same argument with open borders. Sorry, this one last thing.
Yeah.
Same thing with the argument with like open borders. The reason why libertarians support open borders isn't because we just like, oh my God, we just love immigrants. Oh my God, just let everybody in. Our claim isn't that like, oh, we just need to let everybody in. Our claim is that the state is not the just owner of the land in which it's restricting other individuals from entering into. So if the state is not the owner of the land, so therefore it doesn't have a right to restrict individuals from entering that land.
So
Yeah, that's
I'm
why.
with Scott on this one. I think you're with Liquid Zulu on this one, but I'm personally with Scott on this one, which is I was watching this conversation. I don't know if you've seen Scott and Zulu debate open borders. It's a great conversation.
Yeah.
But
I didn't watch it.
Oh, you should watch it sometime.
Yeah,
my
I should.
problem with Zulu was that he was for open borders, but his end result is that the restitution to the American people disappears, which I do not like at all. Basically, he was saying once it's stolen from you, it's no longer yours, and the government doesn't owe you restitution. And I vehemently disagree with that.
Oh yeah, I disagree with that as well. I would say if there's a way in which you could trace back the money in which was stolen from you, back to the person who stole it from you, well then yeah, there's a way in which, and there's a tangible way in which you could get that money back. Well then, to me, yeah, you deserve it back. Yeah, absolutely.
Agreed. And we
Yeah.
can, because and Zulu said you can't track this. We actually can, because for as long as we have tax documents, we can actually track how much money that the government has stolen from individuals at the very least, and businesses, okay? We can't track all the way back like 100 years. But we can use tax documents to track how much money they have stolen.
Yeah. The only thing that I don't agree with is like some people use that justification to be like, oh well, now we need to give the land, all the land that we took back to the Indians. Well, it's just like, okay, unless you can show me
Prove
a
it.
specific
They don't
Indian
have proof.
a specific Indian who's alive today, whose land was stolen from them, and you have the individual who took that land, and there's a way in which you can return that land to him, then you know what? All power to you. But as far as I can tell, that's not what's going on here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep.
That's yeah. So, all right, continue.
Dope. You know me so well,
Dude, unironically, it's not that it's because of not because I'm talking to you, but because of just hundreds and hundreds of people that I have debated.
Yeah, I bet you have. Oh shit.
I agree. There's a level of personal harm, but I just think that the benefits are outweighing. For example, infrastructure projects, roads, police, subsidies to hiring minorities, a military. Yeah.
Now
Social
this is
safety
where you
nets.
pull out the rape
real slick.
island, and now no, the rape utilitarian rape argument. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
This is where you pull out the utopian rape situation, because what he just said right there was, oh well, yeah, there's a little bit of personal harm to it, but how he justifies it, right? He's admitting that there is an aggression going on, but how he justifies that aggression is how he believes that it is better off for society. It's better off for humanity. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting scenario. What if he agrees to this situation, except it's not a dog, it's a child? What if he agrees to the situation? What do you do then?
Oh, well then he's admitted that he supports rape. So what you would say after that is, well, first off, he's going to look fucking terrible because he just admitted to supporting rape. So you kind of win on that front. But what you would say after that is, all right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the difference between utilitarians and libertarians. Libertarians, there is no situation in which you can tell me, there is no circumstance in which you can give me where I would justify raping another individual. Whereas you, if I were to ask you, is it wrong to rape somebody? You would have no choice but to say, not to say no, I mean, not to say yes, that it is wrong to rape somebody, but you would have no choice but to say, it depends on the situation. And that's where I would just leave it.
Okay.
Because if he says, because he's basically saying rape is not always wrong. It just depends on the situation. If you get somebody to admit that, you've basically won the debate, in my opinion. If from my standpoint, you basically won the debate because they just admitted to supporting rape, basically.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so if I need to pull out the big guns, the trump card as you call it, I'll use that scenario.
Yep, and I call that the utilitarian silver bullet. I used to call it the consequentialist, but then you showed me the way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
The way.
So that's the way. That's the utilitarian the utilitarian silver bullet, where to essentially. So this is what I do again. You figure out when you go into these debates, what you got to do is all right, so here's disputes over scarce, there's disputes over scarce resources. We both agree on that. Yes. Okay. What's your preferred way of settling disputes over this scarce resource? Voting? Okay. Voting? Okay, then you use the rape island analogy. Okay. Is it utility? Oh, well, then you use this example. Is it a judge? Okay, well, let's say a judge orders somebody to rape somebody. Would that then make it okay? You have to basically put him in a situation where settling that dispute entails raping somebody.
Right.
Because that's really, because we don't distinguish between stealing something from somebody and raping somebody, right? I mean, obviously, we distinguish it in the fact that obviously one is worse than the other. We would consider it personally to be worse than the other. But fundamentally, they're all aggressions. They're all invasions of property borders.
Agreed. Yeah, I think the one thing that many leftists don't understand is like the problem with rape isn't necessarily the harm. I believe that fundamentally it's the problem of non-consent because like
it's a violation of consent. Yes,
it's a violation of consent because the thing is like harm isn't necessarily a bad thing. People harm themselves all the time, like going to the gym, doing things they don't want to do, waking up for work. Like people go through harm all the way. Harm isn't necessarily a bad thing. I see bad thing. The bad thing must be consent because what else is there? There's nothing else there. There's harm and there's consent. Yeah.
So that's what makes it wrong. And fundamentally, what makes it wrong, because if you rape somebody, because even if they were to say, oh, well, it's the harm that you do to that person, well, then you would ask them, okay, well, let's say you rape somebody and that they don't get harmed and they don't think it's a bad thing. Would you still consider it to be a bad thing? They would have to say yes. So the reason why they consider it to be a bad thing, despite the fact that they're not harmed, is because they violated fundamentally. It's because you violated that person's consent. You've used their body when they didn't want to use it. When they didn't want you to use it, I should have said. So yeah, that's basically what it is.
The funny thing there is, like, I don't think, and it's so funny because I saw you arguing with that chick the other day, whatever, about like, what was it, harm? Like, he said, no, somebody you were arguing with said they don't engage in hypotheticals. And I was like, oh, come on, dude.
But that's where I'd be like, I was like, but, and she kept saying, oh, that hypothetical is ridiculous. That's an egregious hypothetical.
That's the
point. But it's just like, in the end of the day, but that's the point. What the point of a hypothetical is supposed to do is to show you the extent to which you're actually willing to take your own ideology. It's just like, are you willing to actually legitimately hold this belief under every situation? Because if not, then you no longer have a consistent ethic. You no longer have a consistent law. You have two separate laws for two separate situations, basically. But then again, when those two laws compete with each other, how do you determine which way to go? There's no unarbitrary way to figure that out. It's impossible to figure out unarbitrarily. So then you're back to might makes right. It all leads back to might makes right.